Thank you for joining the May 2017 edition of the Sustainable Material Management Web Academy. We're happy to have you participating. This 90-minute webinar is hosted by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to provide training and networking opportunity to state and local governments, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders interested in sustainable materials management. Today's EPA-hosted webinar will feature EPA and the Recycling Partnership State of Curbside Report that identifies key attributes of the highest performing cities for recovering recyclables curbside in the United States. Those defined as collecting more than 400 pounds per household per year. One common attribute the city shared was that each community had some sort of public action to support recycling. What is a public action? It's a term that refers to a trigger or a tool that a local government implements to influence curbside recycling collection. Examples of this can be including having a licensing agreement or a franchise that mandates recycling collection be provided with garbage collection, delivering a container to every home in the community and mandating automatic collection, and other actions or policies that support recycling and includes it in every household service. In this webinar, the Recycling Partnership will share details and data from its far-ranging State of the Curbside Report, and then representatives of 3 high-performing cities, Madison, Wisconsin, Portland, Oregon, and Florence, Alabama, will share how their communities brought recycling to its residents in a way that makes them public action stars of recycling. We will take 1 or 2 burning questions after each presentation, and we'll have a longer question and answer session at the conclusion of the 4 presentations. Please feel free to type questions throughout the webinar. Moving into today's webinar, please note our disclaimer, and now we will get to our speakers. I have the pleasure to introduce our featured speakers. First up is Dylan DeThomas, Vice President of Industry Collaboration at the Recycling Partnership, who will introduce today's topic and share the highlights from the 2016 State of the Curbside Report. Our next 3 speakers will discuss their local recycling programs. Brian Johnson, Recycling Coordinator and Public Information Officer at the City of Madison, Wisconsin. George Dreckman, the former Strategic Initiatives Coordinator, the City of Madison, Wisconsin, will start us off. Our next speaker will be Pete Chisholm-Winfield, Materials and Waste Management Specialist, City of Portland, Oregon, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And our final speaker, who also represents our smallest community, is Rachel Mansell, Education and Outreach Coordinator, the City of Florence, Alabama, Solid Waste Street and Recycle Department. For full bios, please go to our SMM Web Academy site. Dylan, I will now turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be talking to all of you, and I'm really excited. I really love these webinars, even though it's always really hard. I'm used to talking to large groups of people and looking at them, and instead I'm in a hotel room looking at a beige wall. So hopefully the beige wall will react to some of my jokes better than you guys are. Okay, so this is the presentation. How does public action support recycling? The first thing I wanted to do is give a teensy bit of background on the Recycling Partnership. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that's funded by industries. That means brand owners, packaging producers, retailers that help support and try to improve the recycling system around the U.S. We work across the system. We work as state and local. We work with haulers. We work with MRFs, brands, residents. We've leveraged more than $27 million worth of infrastructure around the U.S. in the last 3 years. We have worked with more than 250 community partners, and we've placed more than 400,000 carts around the U.S. And we also work across the nonprofit landscape. I'm sure most of the people online know about the closed loop funds. We are not connected to the closed loop fund, but we're friendly with them. And we had a meeting earlier this year and agreed to share each other's slides. So when you download these slides later, you can reference it and contact them if you're looking to fire a lower, no interest loan to improve your recycling infrastructure. So this is just a quick list of a few of our partner cities around the U.S. and also our states as well. We've started last year in Massachusetts and then this year in Ohio doing statewide initiatives, and look for us to be reaching out to try to grow that part of our program as well. Okay, So that's my intro spiel, and now I'll get into the meat of it. Recycling is, we here at the partnership consider it, we often use the phrase that recycling is a loosely connected but highly dependent system of interacting aspects of the recycling industry. One of the projects that I head up, which is called Asterix, we've kind of boiled that slide down to 5, where you see 5 elements of the recycling industry, and it's really hard. All of those various elements really don't work very well together unless there's that connective tissue, which is something that we're working really hard to begin. And when we're looking at the consumer engagement piece, I think sometimes it gets a little bit lost that when the consumer is putting their can or box or paper or bottle into the curbside cart, that they are ultimately providing a feedstock, for a supply chain, and that they're at the beginning of the supply chain. And so ultimately, when we're talking about consuming of materials, that it needs to go all the way through the system for it to matter, because if somebody isn't buying it at the end, it's not going to matter to anybody. But your constituents, the residents that are in your towns, the recycling systems that you manage, they're the ones that are doing that first step for that supply chain. And it's something I like repeating quite a bit. So why don't we figure out why we're sorting out the national landscape. So I'm going to dig in a little bit to our 2016 report. So to give a little bit, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about data is, you can't manage what you don't measure. So you have to be able to measure something. And as I'm sure a lot of the folks on the phone or on this webinar know, that there is a real paucity of data in the recycling world. And so that was kind of our background of what we were really hoping to do, is we saw that there was no comprehensive set of information measuring curbside recycling program. EPA, of course, has the recycling rates. States have recycling rates. There's a lot of there's a lot of measuring apples, not to apples to oranges even, but what's the term, apples to pretzels. So we were hoping to be able to look at what's happening at the U.S. and build a baseline to understand where curbside recycling is today. So we would be able to give that information to the industry, and then industry could better plan. The places that are doing super well could be celebrated. The places that maybe need some help can realize that they need to hit some tools so they can bring themselves up to those higher performing places, and really just be able to give them data so they can plan and manage materials. So, okay, so what did we do? We took a broad base of cities. We did 250 of the largest cities of the United States. We also did each state capital for all 50 states, and then we fleshed that out with a statistically significant number of cities of different sizes around the United States, representing about 30% of the residents in the U.S. What did we look at? We looked at, as you can see here, container type and size. We looked at frequency of collection. We wanted to see if that had an impact on recycling. Material mix, of course, we got really deep into, which I'm not going to get deep into on this webinar, but you can read the report to get more. Public versus private collection. Automatic versus opt-in. When I say automatic, meaning, you're going to hear me repeat this a bunch, automatic meaning that when you contract for trash, whether it's automatic that you just get trash picked up at your home, that recycling is also automatic. Or if you're contracting for trash, that recycling comes bundled with that. That is what we term automatic, as opposed to opt-in, where you have to do some action to be able to make sure that you're getting your recycling collection. We also look at accepted material as communicated via web, where the materials are going and what materials recovery facility or MRF it's going to. We looked at tip fees, and we also ultimately looked at curbside tonnage. I already talked about the geographically diverse set of surveys. You can see those dots all over the U.S. We really wanted to get a good diverse set of it, so we're not just favoring the highly populated ones or the not as populated ones. We really wanted to kind of hit at all of these. So this is where typically I would be asking you all whether or not you could guess something. So I'm going to play the part of the audience as well. So we in our research of looking at capture rate studies around the U.S., we found that between 800 and 1,000 pounds of recyclables per year, so in pounds per household per year, are available in the home. And if we said we could get half of that, what would you all say? So let's see, I'm going to say you all are going to guess yes. All right, well, you were wrong, everybody, because it's less than that. It's 357 pounds per household per year average. We've got some states that obviously are performing very high, but some that aren't as well. And, you know, we wanted to kind of look at what the attributes were of those highly performing cities and whether we could get other cities to do the same. So what are some of the attributes that we found? 83% of those highest performing cities, which are ones that are over 400 pounds per household per year, or 83% were in carts. 93% provided that collection automatically, which I'd already discussed. 96% of them had single stream collection or some modification of single stream. And then 100%, all of the highest performing cities had something called a public action, which is what we're talking about today, which means that it's when local governments are engaged in the recycling program, have some sort of trigger to trigger recycling at the household level. And I won't be going into the details of that, or other speakers will kind of be digging into what they do to increase it. But the key is that the municipality, the city, the town is connecting to residents to be able to increase recycling. And they really see that it's very effective, as the study showed. So when we're looking at the public action impact, you can see that average of 357 pounds per household per year was the average. When you looked at no public action, it was more than 100 pounds per household per year less for the cities that didn't have the public action. And what we mean by no public action, it's like essentially just leaving it up to the resident to figure out what to do, meaning that there wasn't a website, they didn't get automatic collection, there wasn't any outreach to them, that if somebody was new to town, they had to really do some research to figure out how to recycle, as opposed to it being just as easy it is to throw things out. And then again, as you can see, the big jump to public action from no public action, more than 120 pounds per household per year. That was captured on average of those cities. We, of course, really like people. People are what really make this happen. You know, there's, for all the social media out there in the recycling program, really what matters is connecting with residents and connecting with residents via the people that you have in your programs. And again, we're talking about that trigger. That's why we use that 100% market. One of the things I'm sure that a lot of the people on the webinar know about is the SPC, the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, also did a wide-reaching survey last year called their Access Study, looking at access levels of recycling for various material types. And one of the findings that they found was that 47% of Americans don't automatically have curbside recycling, which we echo that. And then we also found, as I mentioned earlier, that 40% of packaging only 40% of packaging is being recovered in the home, which means that only half of Americans have access, and only half of those materials that are coming into a home are being recovered. And we really think that means that there's an access and equity question to be able to make sure that we're recovering all of that material, that everybody has that same level. Which is why we say make it automatic. You know, we offer cart grants, as a lot of the folks on the phone I'm sure know. But we also offer technical assistance, and it's something that we very much would like to help out with. Sometimes it doesn't take, it's not a matter of having to pass an ordinance, it's just a matter of providing carts for your entire community. But the key is again, to not make it so folks have to opt in, but to make it so it's bundled with trash, or that a cart is given to everybody if it's already picked up. There's all sorts of actions that you can do. Another really great public action that I'm sure a lot of folks know about is, you know, doing pay-as-you-throw, or as some folks call it, pay-as-you-save, where we're really talking about, you know, another trigger to the consumer or the resident to be able to not put stuff in the trash can and be rewarded for it, and put things in that recycle cart instead, hopefully recyclables. You know, and sometimes we've even seen this be effective. There's a town in North Carolina that didn't have automatic, but they did a really holistic outreach campaign where they sent volunteers with iPads to each resident in the town to sign them up for recycling. And that was a really effective way to not just get people to get the recycling carts that they needed, but also to have that personal touch to be able to connect with folks and really get them to participate, which again, that direct engagement is really key. I mentioned licensing. When you're on the East Coast, a lot of the times there's, in the Northeast and the Southeast, we're looking at towns and municipalities that are providing the hauling service. So we hope that they would also include that hauling service for recycling, or as Pete Chisholm-Winfield from my hometown of Portland, Oregon is going to talk later, having a bundling arrangement. So when you contract with a hauler, the hauler in your area, we have franchises in Portland, Oregon, that you automatically get recycling and yard debris, organic collection as well when you contract for trash. I know we're not talking a ton about policy, but landfill bans are, of course, a really excellent tool to be able to communicate to people that there's value in the materials that they have, and then really just hitting people a lot. So hitting tag carts, doing outreach campaigns, doing mailers. It's not just one thing, just like there's not one silver bullet to fix recycling. There's not one silver bullet to be able to get everybody involved. You need multiple touch points, and you need to really do it over and over again to make sure people participate correctly. Of course, I'm with the Recycling Partnership, so I have to make a plug for our tools. Please join our network. We have free tools online. We do our own webinars. We have newsletters. If you go to recyclingpartnership.org, anybody can get a free newsletter. There's forums you can sign up for, and there again, free tools for you to download that you can use, graphics, best management practices. We have a library of data for you as well that you can download. Please use us, and please contact us as well. And I also am, the timing of this just happened to work out. We are also partnering with the Resource Recycling Conference this year. We're going to be doing a big announcement next week where we're going to be offering grants to recycling coordinators at any level from around the country to apply for these grants. And we're going to be funding people to not just attend the conference for free, but also stay at the hotel for free and also pay for travel as well. So look for that announcement next week, both from us, if you're on our e-newsletter list, which you should definitely sign up on at recyclingpartnership.org, but also at resource-recycling.com. And we hope to see you in Minneapolis. And so thank you. I know I've given a little bit of a broad overview. I'm really hoping to hear from Madison, Portland, and Florence, and we'll get into a deep dive into what they're doing and what best practices you can learn from them. And with that, I thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dylan. I have a couple questions we're going to toss to Dylan while we change over to the next presentation. I got one quick question. There was no information about Puerto Rico. Was that on purpose, or can you address that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we just did the United States, just the 50 states. I believe that was when we did the negotiations, it was based on an EPA grant. That was part of it, was just doing the 50 states. We certainly would love to have data from there as well, but that's just where we had started from. So, but that's an excellent note. I'll add that to. I'll give it to the upper ups to see if we can do that next time.
Thanks, Dylan. And then you touched on this a little bit. What do the other 17% of high-performing cities that don't have carts use? And I heard you say exceptional outreach door-to-door with tablets. Any other examples that you can share?
Oh, that don't use carts? I mean, well, the ones that have recycling programs have bins, obviously, but or multiple bins. A lot of them are the smaller communities, and we just see that there's multiple streams. And a lot of them were a lot older, more legacy programs, and so had that kind of, baked in quality of that the outreach had been over, a couple of generations. So that really helped out there.
Great. One or two more. Did you do any assumptions with census data and economic income levels?
We didn't get to that data level. We used the census in terms of trying to find out what the population centers were. We normalized it. We used the municipal, here I'm pulling up my data here. We used the American Community Survey to look at residential collection style units. It was really challenging for some places to see how many households were served. A lot of the communities that offer automatic recycling and trash pickup don't know how many households they serve. When we were helping Portland, Maine buy carts, for instance, they said, between 20 and 30,000 households, and we had to know the exact numbers. So that ended up being a challenge for us.
Great. And then just the last question, is there a different contamination, or did you look at contamination from public action and no public action cities?
That's an excellent question. Contamination with this survey was really aggregating publicly available information. We did reach out to communities to fill in the gaps where we didn't have the data, but contamination is not something that a lot of communities measure, and so is not a publicly available data source. We really do a lot of contamination work, and we're currently doing capture rate studies, actually what's happening at the curbside in 3 major cities right now. In Atlanta and Denver and Chicago, and it's something that we're hoping to do more of. So we're look later on this year for a lot more information on contamination, but that's not something we could fit in with this data because that's not measured by the communities that are offering the data.
Great. For those of you I didn't get to your questions, we will circle back at the end of the presentation, but I would like to now introduce the Madison recycling team. And I'm going to turn the presentation over to George Dreckman and Brian Johnson, otherwise known as the new George. It's all yours. And Brian, I have you on mute. We're going to just unmute you right now.
Perfect. Yeah, hi, this is Brian Johnson. I'm with the City of Madison Streets Division here in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm the recycling coordinator and public information officer for the Streets Division, and I got with me here George.
George Dreckman, who used to be
Muted.
a strategic initiatives coordinator for the city and recycling coordinator, and I am so happily retired.
Yeah, so we're so next slide. I guess we're ready. Okay. Yeah, so just a quick background of like who we are in Madison. We're the capital city of Wisconsin. For those that don't know. We're home of the UW-Madison, of course, and also we're located in Dane County, Wisconsin. That's a little nugget that'll come back around in a little bit. We've got around 250,000 people here in Madison. With about over half of us have a bachelor's degree or greater, and 4 out of 5 of us have at least some college. So a really highly educated group of people that live here. And much of Madison, we're on an isthmus. I don't think a lot of people realize that too. We straddle between Lake Mendota and Lake Monona. So if you look at the next slide, please. There we go. That is a pretty picture that I snagged from Twitter from this med flight doctor who caught that a couple winters ago. So that's basically all of Madison looking east from there. So next slide. So that's who we are as a people. So who are we as a recycler? So recycling is a municipal service that comes at no extra charge for residents, and everybody is just enrolled automatically. There's no opt-in or opt-out option. You live in the city of Madison, congratulations, you're a recycler. Provides it's not a utility fee or anything extra. It's just rolled into the property taxes that people pay automatically, so that there's no extra bill they have to worry about or any kind of fees that happen. Well, that they're related to this recycling services. And we pick up here at the Streets Division. We got around 75,000 properties of 8 units or fewer that we collect from. Bigger than 8 units is considered a commercial property, and private entities handle those. And also we operate 2 year-round drop-off sites that are only for city residents that they can recycle more than they can pick up at the curb even. So next slide. So yeah, so how we're doing with the recycling in 2016, we got 19,903 tons worth of recycling that we collected out of those curbside carts with a 6% contamination rate. It was pretty good. And overall in 2016, we had a 58.4 diversion rate for all of the waste that we collect here at the Streets Division. So that includes like the large items that we pick up, like the refrigerators and things like that, and electronics and brush and yard waste and all the material that passes through our doors. We had a 58.4% diversion rate last year. And so the next slide. So the next question is, how did we get here? And that's where George is going to talk for a bit.
Well, we go back to 1968 with curbside collection for newspapers. 1989, we yard waste ban. 91, we got into the current curbside recycling of materials. And we have a landfill ban that was enacted in the county ahead of the state law, and the county law became kind of the model for the state law. Next slide, please. And We have very high participation rate, always have had it. You know, people shy away from the word mandatory recycling. I would tell you that if you're going to do something, make it mandatory. Because the draconian part of mandatory recycling comes in as to how you enforce it. It's not the word mandatory that automatically makes something bad and incites that segment of the population that's always incited by anything government does. And we've found that the most effective enforcement tool is if someone's not putting out a recycling cart, we just tell them, you start putting it out in 2 weeks or we're going to stop collecting your trash. And that works really well. We haven't issued fines because people have complied because we don't pick up their trash. So that has been a very effective way, and I strongly recommend that you go with mandatory recycling, especially if you're not getting into pay-as-you-throw, which we did not do because of the cost primarily of setting up the infrastructure for collecting the fees. Next slide, please. We do have an aggressive public education campaign, not as aggressive as it used to be. Mm-hmm. When we had recycling advertising budgets in the range of 160,000 to 200 and some thousand a year when we were doing new stuff. Now we're down to $20,000, and that covers all facets of the service of the streets division. We also have an ordinance that requires that landlords share recycling information with their tenants when they sign the lease and every 6 months thereafter. I think that following that can be somewhat spotty because when you move into an apartment, you get a stack of papers 40 feet high and the recycling information is included in that. But it is something that we require, and I think it's helpful. Next slide, please. We have the Recyclopedia, which is a booklet that we put out. Brian just put together a brand new one that might be the best looking one we've done yet. And we also have a MyWaste smartphone app and a website, recyclopedia.org, plus our regular City of Madison Streets Division website. We go for a heavy web presence. The one thing I would say about a website, though, is that people go to a website when they're looking for an answer to a question. That's a good thing. The weakness, though, is that they don't sit around at home and go, you know what, I'm bored. Let me go to the Streets Division website and see what's new in recycling. It's not as an effective way to get out new information as a television ad, a radio ad, or a mailing or something like that. Those are more effective ways to call attention to something new. But still, the web presence is there. It's not completely free. We struggle with the fact here that we still don't have enough people to do, we don't have anybody to do a lot of the work. Our web team at the IT department helps us out very much, but we don't have a web person. We can't take advantage of data and things like that. Next slide. That we'd really like to be able to. So we transitioned to automated in 2005, and one of the challenges we had, and that some of you may have, is if you're like us, when it's trash day, you go down the street and there's a bag of trash, you pick it up. You don't know which house it came from, who put it out, or there's a pile of 5 bags that have come from one house, 5 houses. We didn't know who our customers were. We just knew we picked the stuff up. So we had to develop a list of our customers, which was really difficult to do. Now, some of it you can do fairly easily. Okay, your single-family homes, you got their address in the database, and you can do it. But what about multifamilies? What about businesses? Because we serve small business. What do you do with them? So having a list of who your customers are is critical to making this work. The other thing that happens, I mean, we increased our participation, we increased our diversion, we've saved a lot of tax dollars by cutting we cut down the number of people we have on it, but most important, and this gets left out of almost every discussion I've heard people have about automated collection, It changes the whole dynamic for your workforce. People aren't getting hurt. It's raining today. Well, I don't have to get out of the truck. I'm going to go to work. You know, it creates a much more friendly environment for the employees. It's friendlier and it's safer. That's the biggest thing. We don't have people getting hurt anymore. Next slide. Because we actually saw participation go up 30%. We used 3 different card options. Please, gosh, don't do this. Okay? This has been a royal pain in the behind for us. We have 3 different piles of cards on stock, different 6. 3 for recycling, 3 for trash. I'd say go with the big cart and end it right there. Next slide. That's been our experience.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've definitely learned about it, that like not necessarily needing 3 sizes and maybe not even needing the full body different colored carts, because you're going to run into storage issues having these extra bodies laying around plus extra lids. So if it was the same body but just a high contrast colored lid, as it might be a way to cut down depending on how much room that you have to store these things. Especially like one of the things we learned since our carts are green's recycling and tan is the refuse. From a distance, especially on some shadier streets, it's kind of hard to tell the color difference between the two. So like a higher contrast might help. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it exactly. And there was some genius who worked here that decided the recycling carts are going to be green instead of blue like the rest of the country because it's a green environmental program, by gosh. Thank God he retired. And it's a great way to get some information out to people. The drawback is that you come up with these nice in-molded graphics and then you start making changes. Because one of the advantages about the recycling carts is that you can continue to add things. You've got room. The other thing is here, it says here that people grumble and then adapt. When I was asked after 10 years, what was the biggest surprise of the program? The biggest surprise to me was it worked exactly like we said it was gonna. People came around to it. They complained, they moaned, but it works. Next slide. You can get those carts to the curb. And we have a rollout program for people who are disabled. If they put the cart where we can see it from the street, our driver goes up, picks it up, rolls it down to the curb, empties it, and takes it back. And our people here were afraid people were going to abuse it, and they don't. There are very few people that have signed up for it in correspondence with the people. It's pretty much corresponds with people who need it. You have to get a doctor's note, but it works well. It's been a wonderful operation. We've got a great local MRF that does it. We all work together on this, and so we've been very happy. Is there another slide?
The next slide is just the content. Yeah, that's it. That takes a village thing is something I think is kind of big too. Is that you are lucky. So we have a privately owned, family-owned MRF that handles our recyclable materials. And so we are able to include some things that's maybe not standard with a lot of curbside programs, like our plastic bags. If they're packaged correctly, they can go into that green cart. We got to there because we were able to work with this private MRF to make it happen, because they're a local family-owned company that's been waste hauling in Madison for decades. And it's just with the combination of city ordinances, county ordinances, and everything working together has kind of allowed us to be where we are today through that. And then the next slide will be the last one there, George. There we go. And then there's us. Even though George is retired, he still likes looking at his emails, so you're welcome to send.
Be happy to answer questions. I may not have data at my fingertips, but I get it from Brian.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, George and Brian, and what a great program. I'm going to take 3 questions. We have so many, but I'm going to take 3 to focus on right now. The first, or actually several questions, focus around the no bin, no barrel. So if you don't put out your recycling bin, you don't get your trash picked up. One question was support from city government for that, and you said you didn't do enforcement. So can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Well, with the enforcement stuff, we just haven't really saw the need to do it because, like, the contamination rates stayed consistently low from the MRF. We don't see a lot of complaints at the curb. The only time we've ever really got any kind of issues have been like some people that are really obstinately, for whatever reason, against the idea of there being a mandatory recycling program, and like the not picking up the trash has definitely motivated them to play along, and just some oddball commercial entities that maybe aren't supplying appropriate dumpster space for their tenants, say if they like a large apartment tower, And those are been handled by our building inspection people that get into these buildings, inspect the premises, make certain the recycling is adequate, or the services are adequate for their tenants, and go from there. It's just that that lever of not picking up their trash has certainly been adequate enough without needing to employ a whole fleet of garbage cops. As they were.
We tend to have we rely on the rat out your neighbor program.
Oh yeah.
And then our drivers will look, and if they, we've got this one lady who does not put out a recycling cart, but every time we look in her trash cart, there's no recycling in it. I don't know what she does with it, but God bless her, she's not throwing it out. And so we pick up her trash.
George, that really feeds into the next question that I have, George, is have you guys done any waste sorts that identify how much recycling is still in your trash stream?
2012 was the last waste sort that we were able to do. I don't remember the percentage of the recycling that was in there, though.
I'm trying to remember. We have not had really good funding in order to get that done. That's a problem. And as much as I like my job, or did like it, there's a limit to whether or not I'll put on Tyvek and go dig through a trash truck. Nowadays, when I hit 60, I kind of lost my patience for it. And so we did one, but it was limited. But we have not done one recently. We did one in order to get and ascertain how much organics were in there. So we focused on organics, and that was its purpose. But no, okay. So no, we don't have the data that we should have.
And then my very last question, you mentioned, I believe, a 6% contamination rate, and that you have a very great relationship with your MRF. That's incredibly low. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, no, that's been that was come from a sampling they did back in 2012. But they did just do a recent sample in the past couple of weeks where it ticked up to 9%. But I think a lot of it's been really because this has been something that's been recycling has been a big part of the Madison community, like George said, since 1968 when it started with the newspapers, and it's been a lot of the hard work early on in the program, and we have a lot of just sort of buy-in from the public in general. They understand the importance of this and that it is mandatory, and there's I think a lot of and just the education that comes out of the schools and that too, where it's a big part of this community where people just know, really. I mean, a lot of it is like the cardboard and glass and aluminum cans. I mean, who doesn't know that's recyclable in this community anymore? It'd be shocking if that wasn't something that's covered constantly in the schools.
Yeah, and a lot of our contamination, one of the things we measured this time that we hadn't been able to measure in the past was to get a better idea of how much contamination was in the glass when it was going to be sorted. And because there was a bit of contamination that was coming out with the glass, and we never really had a good count on that. Whereas this time I think they got a better feel for that. But we've always been below 10%. And if we could eliminate Thursdays, our collection downtown in the student neighborhoods, we could cut our contamination by at least a third.
So I promised 3 questions. I just have one more. Is your recycling collection every week or every other week?
Every other week.
We had done weekly before we went to cart, and we switched to weekly, every other week now. Yeah.
Great. So Pete, you're ready to get on deck. Thank you so much to George and Brian, and we'll be back with more questions at the end of the presentation. I have a lot that we didn't get to, so I apologize for the folks on the phone and on the webinar. We'd like to turn our presentation now over to Pete Chisholm-Winfield from the city of Portland, Oregon. Pete, you're up.
All right. Thank you, Christine, for organizing this webinar. Thanks to Dylan for inviting Portland to present on their programs, and also thanks to the other presenters, George, Brian, and Rachel, for sharing your program information. I think this is always a great opportunity to share. These programs are difficult and have lots of barriers and successes, and it's just really important to have this as a platform to share. So City of Portland is about 630,000. It's about the size of Boston. Little known fact, Portland was named by a coin flip. Heads was Portland, tails was Boston, so I think you all know how that coin flip ended. I've worked for University of Oregon, Lane County, which is in the Eugene area, and the city of Portland for a collective of about 20 years. And you know, we have a pretty robust program that a variety of programs that I'll be talking about. And we also, yeah, I'll get into some of the, have some responses to George's suggestion for the larger cart. But we have about 44% of our residential service that has garbage that is in 32-gallon containers, and I'll talk a little bit about that as the presentation progresses. Next slide, please. So I think it's pretty easy for us to, as a municipality, to recognize, and I think that we all probably share this if you're working in any community, that recycling and composting, while challenging, are usually the programs that get focused on the most. So we want to share the EPA and also the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality's materials hierarchy. And we really try to focus development of new programs higher up in the hierarchy to focus on waste prevention, reuse, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. Next slide, please. So it's not just us. City of Portland has a pretty strong relationship with the Oregon DEQ and Metro. And there are some areas that each one of us has authority over. So the DEQ provides recycling requirements on all counties, and they also do a lot of research. So they help inform us in our programs by doing waste sorts and by doing analyses of life cycle analysis of different materials and different actions. And then Metro has authority over the transfer and disposal of municipal solid waste in facilities, and then the city has authority over collection and generators. Just to back up just a sec, this is going to be kind of an overview of a lot of different stuff, so there's a lot more that can be provided that we have in an attachment that will give you more information that's part of the webinar. Next slide, please. So collection, transfer, processing, this is really, this is a private-public partnership where government provides research and administrative rule and really kind of the connection between citizenry and the program. And the private companies really are doing the lion's share of collection, transfer, and processing. So as you see here, we have 34 commercial companies, 14 of them have residential franchisees. Municipal solid waste is largely run by private, but there is some publicly owned aspects of that. Our two main transfer stations are owned by Metro, which is our regional government, which is a pseudo-county organization. And then recycling, the MRFs are privately owned, glass sorting facility, and the glass manufacturer. We do like our craft beer out here, and so a lot of the demand for having a glass recycler here is because of the amber bottles that are plentiful out here in the Northwest. And then in composting, again, some publicly owned, but largely privately owned and operated. Next slide, please. So City of Portland policies and compliance. So in general, you know, glass is separate from our programs. We've heard from manufacturers that glass is a contaminant, and I think everyone's heard this. So we have decided to make sure that it's through our city laws that it's separated from all of the recycling. We also, haulers are required to provide collection services, and they're also required to use biodiesel at a 20% rate, and also we have a clean fleet requirement that means that the haulers have to have trucks that are 12 years or newer for full-time trucks. And contamination, while it is still an issue here, residentially it's about 9%, similar to Madison. Multifamily, however, is about double that. But according to our rules, it's not allowed, and there are a number of mechanisms that address it. Businesses are required to recycle. The ones that generate a lot of food scraps are required to compost or participate in a collection program. We have a ban on plastic bags and styrofoam, and we also require that businesses don't put their containers out on sidewalks. Multifamily, there's a requirement for weekly recycling and also a requirement on property managers to provide the service and education. Residential, as Dylan had referred to, we have, once you sign up for a service, you get 4 bins. One's for garbage, and typically that's 35 or 32 gallon. And then we got a 60 gallon for recycling picked up every week, 60 for compost every week, and sorry, the garbage is every other week. And then there's a small bin, 20 gallon for glass. Construction demolition, all projects greater than 50,000 are required to do some level of reporting. And then we have a new ordinance that just was adopted, where if the building that's being deconstructed is 1916 or older, it's required to be dismantled for salvage, which is an example of how we're moving up that hierarchy into reuse, and that really is having a ripple effect, not only environmentally but also economically and also with workforce development, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Next slide, please. So we have an outreach team. So we have a policy team, it's about 10, an outreach team, it's about 10. We have a technical assistance program called Sustainability at Work. There's a ton of information on their website if you're interested. We also have a variety of campaigns that are focused on residential. The Curbsider is kind of our twice a year newspaper for recycling. Climate Action Now is focused on not only your stuff and looking at the CO2 emissions associated with your stuff and the full life cycle of that, not just end of life. Also looking at your food, your home, transportation. And then Resourceful PDX is more about the sharing economy. We have a variety of repair cafes where there are people there who understand how to fix things, that are teaching other folks that have broken things how these things get fixed. So we're really trying to move up with our outreach into the realm of reuse and waste prevention. We also have a person that's focused on multifamily, and then also construction demolition. There's assistance for space-efficient housing, which is the accessory dwelling units, or if you have a single-family home and you want to put a smaller rental or another infill project. So it's really about density, but also environmentally speaking, smaller spaces are a lot friendlier. Also, we have a deconstruction workforce training. So a part of our deconstruction and salvage requirement for older buildings is coupled with the workforce training, where we're teaching, we have a program where we're teaching folks how to deconstruct and salvage, and they're using that skill set in applying for jobs for these companies that are doing the salvage. Next slide, please. And this is just a program summary. Again, population, we got about 25,000 businesses, 4,000 multifamily, 150,000 single-family residents. Our tip fee is about 115. Our recovery rate is 64. It used to be 70 because we counted some reuse and waste prevention, but that has been eliminated from the state's methodology, which we try to copy. And the bulk of our material really comes from commercial and multifamily. We have a lot of folks that travel from outside of the Portland region to work in Portland, and that's one of the reasons why you see that 80% in commercial multifamily versus 20 in single family. We got 22 staff. Our budget's about 3.5 million. And we also have our Portland Recycles plan, which is on our website. And this is our community engagement piece. This is how we develop our North Star goals. This is how we engage with our elected officials in agreeing to program direction, and then also, you know, they wick in and add things as well. So that's our North Star, and that's our way, the way that we move our programs forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one, you know, I am co-presenting here with folks from Madison and from Alabama, and I just wanted to let everyone know that my 1.5-year-old, while, you know, he's really interested in learning how, what different sounds things make, it's a lot easier to teach him what kind of a sound a duck makes as opposed to, you know, a badger or a crimson tide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pete. Much appreciated. Again, we have more questions than we can get to, but quite a few questions on your glass recycling program. How's the contamination rate on that? How's that work? And do you do some due diligence to see that the glass indeed does go back to your craft breweries?
Facilities are not under our authority. The collection really is. But because glass is separated, the glass comes in really clean, and the glass sorting facility is an e-cullet facility. So if you're familiar with that, it's really sorted with optical sorters. So while the end product isn't perfect, it's pretty darn clean. That processing facility is a collaboration with Owens, Illinois, who actually does the recycling. And they're the ones that are there. Last I checked, it was about 65 to 70% amber, and then 30% clear, and then a little bit of other colors depending on what kind of orders came in.
Great, thank you so much. I also have a question just about tip fees. If you have a range you could share for both composting and recycling.
Well, so like I mentioned before, garbage 115, about 25% of that 115 is dedicated toward education and outreach programs. Just as a side note, if you just have yard debris, it's going to be around the 35 buck a ton range, but if you have food scraps with yard debris or just food scraps, it's going to be around the $60 a ton range. With our MRFs and the recycling, that varies. That's just going to depend on what the market is reflecting, and really that revenue, if there is any, is going to be shared with the haulers. That does not come to any of the government programs. So that's just something that the haulers put back into their system, and they use that in negotiation with businesses to bring down rates. So we understand.
Great. And just one final question. Do you address contamination in your marketing and advertising materials?
Oh, for sure. You know, that's something that we have on our signs. It's something that we incorporate into our presentations. We do a variety of waste sorts in collaboration with our state DEQ, as well as Metro. So we have an understanding of what the contamination is. We talk about keeping plastic bags out. There's a lot that goes into it. And also the haulers, they could do a better job, but they do a decent job of letting us know areas of town or specific businesses that have contamination issues, so that we can be more focused with our messages as opposed to going out to the whole community and talking about it. If it's not a whole community issue, then, and you just need to talk to one business or one neighborhood, then, you know, you'd rather do that because that's going to be much more affordable.
Great. Once again, we have so many more questions, and we'll get to them hopefully towards the end of the presentation. So thank you so much, Pete, for that beautiful picture and also for your presentation today. Our final speaker is Rachel Mansell from the city of Florence, Alabama. And Rachel, I turn the presentation over to you. I can't hear you, Rachel.
I'm sorry. Hello. Okay, I'm Rachel Mansell. I'm with the city of Florence in Alabama, all the way down and a whole lot smaller. First of all, just thank you for having me, and thank you for to all the other presenters. I have learned so much, and y'all have programs that we dream about. And anyways, we are on the north corner of Alabama on the Tennessee River. We've got a population of about 40,000. We have a state university, the University of North Alabama, and the whole city is about 10 miles in radius, and so comparatively we're pretty small. We do pull in materials and reach out to residents from drop-off facilities throughout the county, and so that's handy. But as far as our curbside program, we put carts out. Let me back up a little bit. The program started in 1988, and they started collection citywide, but you had to put it out in a bin. In 2015, we were able to do recycle carts with the recycling partnerships. Thank you, thank you. And it has worked perfectly and had some challenges, but we're tickled. This has worked really well. We started with a pilot program and put a few carts out, and so because if your neighbor has one, you want one, and so it became contagious, and it was all done through promotion and why people wanted it. There's just nothing mandatory that goes on in Florence, Alabama. It is all by quality of life and service to residents, and so we're really pleased that it has gone as well as it has. We basically had put carts out throughout the city. We put a sticker on them that said, hey, if you don't want me, leave me out and I'll be picked up. And so pretty much everybody kept one. I would love to know the rate. We didn't track it, but the rate of people that did not keep their recycle cart initially but then called back later and said, hey, I changed my mind, I do want it back. So anyways, we do automated collection. I know the city of Madison was talking about safety issues. It's the same thing for us. Having one guy in the truck and being able to collect automated is a huge deal versus having two guys on the back of the truck. So let's just get into this. I'm going to kind of narrow it down and do some things that we do for public action. We do a lot more than this, but these are a few things. Since we're municipally owned and we do our own collection and we have our own MRF, we have a lot of control, so that's helpful because the guys on the street, have to answer to the guys in the MRF if they pick up a bunch of garbage. And so they're inclined to help us out on the street. We started out with oops cards. It was more of a negative message of like, you've done this wrong. And we really quickly got feedback from residents that, if they've gone to the trouble to collect recycling and pile it up, they expect 2 gold stars, not a correction form. And so we kind of switched to thank you for recycling, help us. Because once again, we're small and it's a municipal program, so we are service-based and we do not accept glass, no styrofoam. The biggest 2 challenges is for us going to carts and automated collection is cardboard boxes, because not all cardboard boxes fit into carts. So we needed residents to break those down or figure out how to collect them additionally, because we want them. It's a good feedstock for the recycle center. And then to set carts 3 feet apart, because when you're collecting garbage automated and recycling automated on the same day in 2 different trucks, you have to be able to grab the cart without knocking the other one over. And so of course, residents learn real quickly because you don't pick it up and then they call and you say, hey, move it 3 feet apart. So that worked too. So the oops cards are big, and so we talked about like the different costs for things. These were cheap. We had them done through Office Depot. I'm probably not supposed to say that, but on Post-it notes, and you know, for $150, we had a whole pads of stickers that the guys just have in their truck and they can slap onto the cart. So that's handy. Communicating with residents as these carts go out was the most important thing. I am a huge fan of the in-mold label, and I would put graphics on the top that has the picture of the main items that go into the cart. And I realize things change in programs over the decade, but I think that most of us would agree that, you know, paper, cardboard, plastic bottles, jugs, and cans, we're still going to be recycling those when I retire, I hope. The plastic bag on the back of the cart with a magnet in it and a postcard that kind of says, hey, what's going on? And, you know, meet your cart. We really pushed it as a benefit to residents as they were getting something new. And so they really bought in, and the Recycle Partnership did all of these graphics. Unbelievable. They've got great tools and great resources. The tours and events, I guess I should have started the slideshow from the beginning. How about that? I might be a little nervous. Hang on. I'll flip through so you can see the whole screen. Tours and events, it's basically talking to people. Our education outreach funding is like me plus $5 grand. So we just don't have money to do a whole lot, and so we have to make it go a long way. And if we can get students or anyone else into the recycling center to see the MRF, see what happens, or to the landfill and see the garbage and the mess that's there, then we can generate action. And then getting out and about, going to the events, we do take a shot at recycling. We bring bales of materials to them. I mean, the goal is to get people talking and say, hey, what can I do? Social media to media relations, we utilize every bit of free PR we can get. If we do promotions with the schools and the media, I make sure I send all of the media people from newspapers to broadcasters Christmas cards. You know, you have to do what you can. We've done contests on social media like selfie with your cart, get caught recycling, any of these things that we can give away and kind of draw attention to just having good old fun with it. To me, pictures are priceless. Like I said, I mean, the images of what goes in this cart is huge. And so we're pretty corny, you know, no food, no glass, no monsters. I had people were like, ooh, what kind of monsters? I mean, you get people talking and then they have questions and you can kind of go from there. But we pulled all these images offline. They're 3D, they're handy. Recycle the jug, but not the milk. Recycle the can, but not the stuff, you know. Just trying to get that contamination point across of we want your stuff, but we don't want any food. Recycling makes being a superhero super easy, and this was one of the Recycle Partnerships campaigns, but we have ran with it. It is the best thing that we have done as far as I'm concerned. These capes were purchased, and they were $3 or $4 a piece, which is big money to me. But, you know, a piece of newspaper and a string makes a superhero cape. And then it's better because then it can be recycled. And so, you know, we are in the business of saving the earth. And so it's serious stuff. And we need to enlist all of the superheroes we can to go out and make a difference and tell, you know, mom, dad, grandma what goes in that cart. And then to also talk about a big thing that we do talk about is what the materials turn into. And locally here, we have SCA tissue plant. And so a lot of that homework junk mail white paper turns to toilet paper. And so we'll hand out toilet paper. I mean, it's just about having fun for us and kind of engaging people. So, you know, we do lots of other stuff, but I wanted to kind of stay focused and I'll be glad to answer questions. This is my contact information. Email me, call me. But thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Much appreciated. So I have a few comments and questions specific to your program, Rachel, and then I'll open up the lines for Brian and everyone else to join. So one question that came up is on your PR material, you used graphical pictures over photos. And can you talk a little bit about why you made that decision?
Why we made the decision to use photos over clip art?
Yeah, yes.
Basically, it's worth 1,000 words. You know, a picture's just better, and it shows what goes in it, and there's no room for error that it's a plastic bottle.
Excellent.
Kind of a simplistic answer, but that's really the deal, yeah.
Thank you. And did you talk at all about your recycling rate?
Well, I didn't even get into, but we have the RFID technology in the carts, and we've got about a 70% participation rate in that. We're recovering about 3,500 tons a year, so we're a pretty small program, but we're a small town, so we're tickled with it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then I have a question. I'm going to open it up to all three of you because I believe all three of you mentioned that you have colleges within your communities, and curious if you do anything special from that angle to reach that community. Rachel, do you want to start with you?
Sure. We, you know, that's one of the biggest challenges because they turn over every semester. And so you're starting over. But the college really does a lot of its own education stuff with their sustainability center. One of the biggest challenges was providing recycling within the residents' dorms. And so they would hand out these little apartment bins, and then they would be gone, and so it would be a continual having to get new bins. And so we have started giving them paper bags and saying fill it up and drop it off in a cart. And so they do have access to recycling, and that's good, but that is a big challenge too.
Great. George and Brian, do you have anything to share?
Well, yeah, what part of our student outreach too has been that requirement that landlords do share that recycling information is a bit of it too, because a lot of the students are going to wind up in the rental houses in that downtown area, so having that requirement where that information must be shared is helpful too. And the on-campus housing isn't handled by the city, actually. The university picks their own, and so there's that. What you're going to add, George?
Yeah, that's the problem. We have at least 3 different systems that they could use: larger apartments, smaller apartments, which would be us, and then the university on-campus system, so that there is no one clear message we can give. Okay, well, we could focus on 10 materials and let the rest go by the wayside, but that would just increase confusion, we think. The other thing was, in the very beginning, we hit on a great thing. We had people, the pizza companies delivered recycling instructions attached to the pizza box.
Oh, that's brilliant.
We could return, at that time, we were recycling the pizza box. Well, we couldn't recycle the pizza boxes anymore, and so that took care of that. But that was one of the best ideas we had. They were happy to do it, but oh well, too much cheese, grease.
Absolutely. The pizza box question always comes up. Pete, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, we have a number of colleges and universities in the Portland area, but I will bring up one example that I think is noteworthy. Portland State University has their own kind of interior collection system, and then they have a single source contract with one of our companies. The cool thing about that contract is that it requires monthly reporting, and they do get, based off of the number of tons that they recycle, that is matched up with the market value during that time frame, and whatever department is collecting that material gets the value of that recycling according to that tonnage back to them in a rebate. So it's kind of a cool little system they have set up with some incentives that I think are pretty unique.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other comments on college and university?
The one thing that hampers us and it's Brian now who has a staff of none.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to go and do things on campus and go do some other stuff when you'd like to take the weekend off to be home with the family.
Right.
So
right.
that's been a big problem for us.
Right. And clearly, we always talk about partnerships in the college and university sector. At least in New England's one of our biggest partnerships with some of our schools. So I totally appreciate that and what they're doing on campus themselves. I just want to highlight to everyone that presentations are in the handout box, and they will also be posted on our website probably by early next week, if not even today. So please look there. We got a lot of questions about multifamily recycling, and it leads me to conclude that we need to do a webinar specifically on multifamily recycling. But Dylan, did you have anything to say about multifamily recycling with respect to the study and the information that you found there?
Yeah, multifamily. So no, I don't really. I say yeah, but I'm saying no. Multifamily recycling is another data set that we didn't collect. We were looking at that single family home, just because that's where the infrastructure and where best management practices exists. So we do know that that's the next big challenge, and we're already gathering information and data on how we would be able to help out in that sector. But right now, concentrating on that on the curbside.
I would
Excellent.
just say that in
ahead,
30 years in the business, the problems of multifamily recycling have not changed, except, they've just been around longer. You've got landlords that don't care. You got landlords that if they, in order to put recycling dumpster in, they have to lose a parking space. We try to treat all of our customers, whether they're single family or multifamily, the same. It kind of works, but you still have all kinds of contamination issues. It's a real big challenge, and I'm hoping somebody has an answer that works in more than 20% of their buildings, because that seems to be the success rate. And the participation, the diversion is always, 20-25% lower than it is in single family.
Right. And I'd also like to chime in that Pete talked about the ordinances in Portland in terms of the new buildings being built having to have access for recycling materials. Seattle has something similar. I know that Orange County in North Carolina does. That's a really excellent best management practice to have that ordinance. And then on the other side of it, you have like the interesting stuff happening in San Jose, where they collect their multifamily and they essentially do a dirty MRF there at Newbie Island. Arguable how effective it is, but you just have to kind of come at it from different angles, I guess. It's interesting. Pete, do you have anything to add to that?
I'd say no to dirty MRFs. They're not very effective.
Oh, right.
Really?
I would like to, just from a multifamily perspective, it's something that we're gearing up for as well. We do have systems in place, but we are discovering a couple of different things. The recycling isn't always in the same place as the garbage, and right. The capacity for garbage is about twice as much as the capacity for recycling. So we're recognizing that those are two fundamental issues with just the logistics of moving material. Then you have the issues of language barrier. You have the issues of how long term are your tenants. You have a lot of what we're recognizing as opportunities to engage with folks in the community that maybe aren't regularly engaged with government, and that has some issues as well. So we're identifying some of those barriers, and we're really looking forward to improving, because I mentioned before that our contamination rate's about twice in multifamily what it is in residential.
Great. Okay, let's switch now to cart size. I've had a couple comments, Pete, that you were talking about. You picked up recycling every other week, as did Madison, but commenting that what size carts do you use? And, oops, or did I make a mistake, Dylan? So let's just go over that again.
So the garbage is every other week. Recycling and compost is every week.
And the size cart that you typically have?
The majority of Portland single-family residents have a 35-gallon every other week garbage. And when we made that switch, we saw a 35% reduction in garbage and almost triple the amount of organics that we started collecting, because we did also switch every other week organics to every week organics. So that switch had some pretty significant impacts, and it's quite a success story. And those numbers have held steady over the last 5 years.
And Pete,
And the size of your recycling, I'm sorry, Pete, your size of your recycling cart?
60-gallon every week.
Okay. And continue, whoever was speaking. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sorry, it was me. I was following up. I was going to say it's the same size for the organics as well. Isn't that right, Pete?
Yeah, 60 for organics every week.
We went with a 95-gallon trash cart because our goal was to try and minimize the material that was being put out for our bulky good collection, which was our most expensive program at that time. And so we're thinking if you can fit it in the big cart, put it in there. We also wanted people to have enough capacity. Let's say they clean their garage, they can put the extra bags into the larger cart. So we went with the larger cart built around the exceptions. And at that time, we weren't doing organics. Our yard waste is collected loose and separately seasonally. But now we've gone to we're doing a pilot program in a number of places on organics. And I think if we get that phased in, we can take a look at doing exactly what Pete's doing and switching to smaller carts. But we had a different goal in that sense. I got beat up for sending the wrong message, and I get that, but my message was an operational one. And we went with a 65-gallon recycling cart, and what we've found now over time is that between 500 and 800 people a year switch from a 65-gallon cart to a 95-gallon cart for recycling, and we swap them out at no charge. And that's been true for 10 years. People switching up to the larger cart. So if I had it to do over again, I would just start by giving everybody a 95 recycling cart as well.
And can I just say one thing?
Of course.
It also, in your community, it also depends, the urban density within your community will affect it. You know, so if you have room in your garage or if you have room in your yard to put larger containers, then, you know, maybe it's not as big of a deal. Also, with a smaller container, you are reinforcing waste prevention as not a direct association, but an indirect association, and you're hopefully going to be, you know, encouraging folks through the restriction of that space in the cart to make some decisions about whether or not they're going to buy that disposable thing. It's going to fill up their trash container. It could be, you know, paper plates, or, you know, it could be something that's one use. And they might think twice if they have less space. Now that's debatable, but, you know, I think it does encourage waste prevention.
I think it's a sound theory, definitely. It's that we just had this different concern operationally, you know, that led us away from the more environmental message that the smaller carts.
Rachel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we did 64-gallon, kind of the middle of the road, but now we collect every week. And so, you know, hindsight is doing the 95 and collecting every other week. But for operational costs, but, you know, as an education outreach person, I'm an every week girl because I want it to be as easy and used as often as I can. See, I'm not the operations person, so I'm not worried about the money. So from my standpoint of the earth, then, you know, every week is great. The blue, we did a bright blue cart, and we got some kickback from the, you know, Keep Florence Beautiful boards and things, and the historical boards, because we did not go with green and they would have liked it to have blended in a little better. But once again, as the education person and my message, it has worked brilliantly because you can't mistake it for the garbage. It's bright blue, and you can spot them driving down the road and behind the garage, which for me is great, not so good for other people that are trying to meet homeowners association qualifications. So yeah, you know, it's just it's all about what your goals are. So mine were met very well, and we like that 65-gallon size. Now we're the same. We have larger ones, the 95 gallons, that we provide to businesses. And so if you call us and want a second recycle cart, we'll just give you the 95-gallon one. And we have residents that have two recycle carts. That's fine. And we've looked at doing the tiered garbage rates, but once again, we're very service-oriented and our resident-driven. So the only way we'll kind of turn to the pay-as-you-throw for garbage rates will be as rates increase. But anyway, 64 gallons where we are.
We have this saying in the street division that homeowners don't mind paying property taxes for police protection, fire protection, and our services, our solid waste services. But you never want a cop to knock on your door. You never want a firefighter to knock on your door. But by gosh, we better come by 2 or 3 times a week to pick your stuff up. So we're the most, it's very difficult to switch to a user fee-based system when you're already on the tax roll.
Absolutely. We have just some questions, I think, brought up, George, by your comment on bulky waste collection in your communities, and if that is a fee for service. And want to go through the Madison? Go first.
Yeah, no, yeah. I was going to say with the bulky collection, something that we do every other week. Most items don't have a fee. There are some things that we charge for, like refrigerators are $35 because of the coolant in it. Like we charge for hot tubs because they're so big, and a few other things. But predominantly the bulky pickup or large item collection is something we do for free. I mean, it's something that probably we also couldn't transition to being a fee service either, just because it's such a high demand in some of our low-income neighborhoods or the high turnover neighborhoods, where it would be seen as punitive if we started charging for that for them. And so so it's more or less a free service, except for those kind of oddball items that are outliers.
Yeah, we generally speaking might put a fee on something that has post-collection costs like CFC removal or CRTs, things like that. But we started charging for mattresses and box springs when we had a mattress and box spring recycling program, and that hit our poorer neighborhoods harder, and we'd leave things till they put fees on. It looked bad. So we went back to the council and just got an appropriation of about $125,000, $130,000 to cover the cost of recycling those mattresses, and we rolled them then into back into the free pickup service. We get them recycled now, but we don't charge a fee for it anymore.
Right. Pete, what do you have to say?
Bulky waste. So it's a pay-as-you-throw system. If it falls outside of our delivered carts, a resident would have to order a drop box service, which is a negotiated service. But if they did have an extra bag, or they had something that was relatively small, as opposed to a clean out of a garage or a roof tear off, then there's a set price that the hauler would charge for that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but there is a price for small amounts of bulky waste.
Great. And Rachel?
We do. We offer trash collection, and it's pretty much as long as it's resident-based and it's not construction debris, there's no cost. So we are looking at other programs like y'all's where we can change that, but we just do collection. They put it out on the curb and we pick it up.
I would say too, in the city of Madison, we do have a construction cap on it's the large items free for within reason if someone's filling the frontage on their house weekly, or something else going on, or And we have a construction debris cap of like 240 pounds, is what we say, like there's like the equivalent of 240, 250 pounds worth of stuff, so we're not picking up contractor stuff off the curb.
Great. And let's just end the last couple minutes with organics. Obviously, Pete, you said you have a 35-gallon pickup once a week, every week in the city of Oregon. So in Madison, you're doing a pilot. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, whatever we call our organics program is really
not a pilot anymore.
Yeah, it's not
I said it wrong.
Yeah, it's a pilot in function,
Okay.
but not in name. It's more of a food waste diversion thing. So we consider the yard waste like a separate entity than the food waste or the organics collection that we have. We have about 1,000 homes, actually a little more than 1,000 homes now. Just about 40-ish businesses. We got a church and a few schools that are in this program where once a week we collect the food waste they generate through a curbside collection carts, a 35-gallon cart. That we get it out. We pick it up every week on their trash day. We just have some select neighborhoods because we run into a budget problem where it's just one truck and one driver that we have to spend on this organics collection. So we keep it small, but we're trying to grow it like 3 yards on the cloud of tusk variety of growing the program. So just as we can add around here, add some more homes there, and just keep inching it out bit by bit until the money tree sprouts and we can do something more robust with this particular program. And I could talk way longer about our organics program here. So it's a bit of a speech. So I don't want to take up too much time, but that's kind of where we are.
So you,
Thank
may I
you.
ask a
And
question?
Rachel, we'll just wrap up with you.
Yeah,
Sure.
we do not do organics. We would love to do it. Right now we, I do some workshops and some education on encouraging residents to compost on their own. And of course, we even do leaf collection and we compost the leaves, but we encourage residents to do their own leaf composting as well, which would save us collection costs. But, you guys that do the compost collection, are y'all sending those to facilities, private facilities, and do they charge you to bring it to them?
Here in the city of Madison, the answer is yes to both. Though we do work with the private composter, and we are being charged. It's a small tipping fee, but it's a tipping fee just the same.
So I had mentioned that it was about $35 for yard debris and about $60 if it has food in it. So if it's residential food and yard debris mix, it goes to a regular windrow owned by a private company. If it's just commercial food scraps, which we have about 1,200 businesses participating in that, at the tune of about 18,000 tons, that goes to an anaerobic digester in Junction City, which is south of Portland, and that's about $65 a ton.
There are currently no composting facilities in Alabama or close nearby, so just send your people our way, okay?
And Rachel, that's a great way to end the topic, to end the conversation on organics, is the infrastructure is so very different throughout the country. Up here in New England, we have 4 states with organic bans. So a very different landscape, in other parts of the country. So with that, we are wrapping up on our time. And always appreciate the questions. Again, a shout out to all of you who I didn't get to. There are probably 100 that I didn't address, so apologies to that. But thank you for joining us, and I hope you found the webinar helpful. We wish to thank our speakers for sharing their recycling programs and the twists and the turns, and really lovely to share a combination of what everybody is doing. Finally, most of all, we have to thank you for joining us for this month's SMM Web Academy, and hope you can continue to join us. It's for you that this is designed for. Please make sure you fill out your evaluations, very important to us, to bring about programming. And again, I think I am going to do something on multifamily recycling. We had so many questions on that. We'll post the webinar audio in about a week and the slides either today or tomorrow. Please join us for next month's webinar where we shift back to sustainable food management, and we'll bring you an update on the Save the Food campaign. Look for a marketing email from us next week. So again, thank you to our speakers, and this concludes today's session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.